ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजना सहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नाम्ने गौरत्विषे नमः। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। सर्वशास्त्राब्धिपीयूषः सर्ववेदैकसत्फल सर्वसिद्धान्तरत्नाढ्य सर्वलोकैकदृक्प्रद सर्वभागवत प्राण श्रीमद्भागवत प्रभो कलिध्वान्तोदितादित्य श्रीकृष्ण परिवर्तित परमानंद पाठाय प्रेमवर्षक्षरायते सर्वदा सर्वसेव्याय श्रीकृष्णाय नमोस्तु मे। मदेकबन्धो मत्सङ्गिन् मद्गुरो मन्महाधन मन्निस्तारकमद्भाग्य मदानन्द नमोस्तुते। असाधु साधुतादायिन् अतिनिचोच्चतारक आनमुञ्च कदाचिन्मां प्रेम्णार्थकण्ठयो स्फुर। श्रीमद्भागवत महापुराण की। Hare Krishna. So we are towards the end of our discussions in this unit, in this 13th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. So what I'm going to do is as many verses today, we will try to complete as many as possible. And yeah, I got a request from few devotees saying that they are okay to have another session, but they didn't want something to be put for homework, I mean, or self-study, you can say. So what I'll do is for this chapter, if I'm sure probably few verses will remain today, around 15-20 verses. So I'm going to take another session tomorrow in the same time. So for those of you who can join in that session, you please can join in. And in case anybody has a very urgent engagement because of which they can't, so then it's okay. But otherwise I'll end this chapter because it has 60 verses, so in another session apart from today's session. Okay, so coming to the discussion in this chapter, which is Dhritarashtra quits home, we have seen that how Vidura came back after the war was over, and after many years after that, Vidura came back, and it was very a great delight for all the residents of Hastinapur's palace to have Vidura back with them. So Vidura's reception was talked about in prior verses, and then Yudhishthir's inquiries with Vidura began. Especially Yudhishthir glorified Vidura as one who is Tirtha Bhuta Swayam Vibho. he said that Bhavat Vida Bhagavata Tirtha Bhuta Swayam Vibho Tirthi Kurvanti Tirthani Swantasthena Gadabhrata. He said that actually people like you, devotees, pure devotees like you, they are uh, holy places personified, and you are the one who actually uh, purifies even the purest of holy places. So he glorified Vidura in that manner, and then started inquiring to him about his travels, his stay, and also his visits to, especially Yadus and their news, what was happening in Dwarka. So after this, in the last verse, we saw that Vidura started talking to Yudhishthir and all those who were assembled about all the events that took place in his pilgrimage. And he spoke to them in order serially, one after another. But he didn't speak about he did not speak about especially the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. So there is a request that can we turn off the video, so we can, if the voice is breaking. So I mean, it's if it's on the receiver side, then we can see. Otherwise, if voice is too much breaking, then I am okay. Balbhadra Kripa Pro can anytime switch off the video. Okay, fine. So I think for many it's working fine. There is no problem. Okay, so he did not describe the destruction of Yadu dynasty. And why was that? So that is spoken in the verse 13. Nanma priyam durvishaham nridam swayam upasthitam navedayat sakaruno dukkhitan drashtum akshamaha. Compassionate Mahatma Vidura could not stand to see the Pandavas distressed at any time. Therefore, he did not disclose this unpalatable and unbearable incident, because calamities come of their own accord. So actually, Vidura was extremely affectionate to all the residents of Hastinapur, and especially towards Pandavas. So he didn't want to give this unpleasant news of departure of Yadus and Lord Krishna to them. He thought that anyway, in course of time, this will be known. So why to put them in great anxiety and in great distress by giving this news? Apriyam Durvishaham, this was a very unpalatable news of Yadukula's dynasty's destruction, and also Durvishaha, very unbearable. So it will be automatically known. So that's why this Vidura, he didn't share the news with all the Hastinapur residents, especially the Pandavas, because he was always very much with compassion, Sakaruna, and he didn't want to see Pandavas again again unhappy, distressed. He had seen that after many years of distress and agony, now at last Pandavas had been ruling, and they were in the power. And I mean, of course, after a great fratricidal war, but then still, now he was seeing them in a position where they were actually having their rightful kingdom and a rightful life of kingly opulence. So he really did not want to give them this news of great distress and put them in again further despondency. So that's why he didn't share the news. So this was the reason. So Prabhupada quotes in purport that according to Niti Shastra, one should not speak an unpalatable truth to cause distress to others. So this is a principle of Niti, actually, that one should not speak uh, such words which will cause distress to others. Especially even if something is truth, but it is said that the truth, if it is to be spoken, we have to speak it in a way that it is right, kind, and necessary. Sometimes some people they relish speaking some bad news or some miserable news and making everybody miserable. Sometimes we see this tendency. Some people very much, as soon as they hear some very miserable news, unpalatable news, they want to share with everybody. and not so much in the mood of service or in the mood of sharing that information, but more because they relish spreading the misery around. So that's not needed actually. Niti says that if there is some unpalatable news and you can avoid speaking it, you should avoid it, because anyway that news will come automatically in one's course of life, and that's why one should not become the harbinger of the misery for the people. you know we want to actually give people pleasant surprises and not some unpleasant news or unpleasant surprises. Of course, sometimes as a piece of information we may be sharing certain things and all that, but what the point is this, that in general a person should speak in a way that is anudvega karam. Krishna says this in Bhagavad Gita also: anudvega karam vakyam satyam priya hitam chayat swadhyaya bhasano chaiva vangmayam tapa uchate. He says this is an austerity of speech, to speak words which are not unpalatable, which don't cause which actually don't cause any distress to others. We should speak such words like that. So truth has to be spoken, we understand, but then it can be spoken in a palatable way, like that. Of course, Prabhupada does say in Bhagavad Gita that when it comes to Krishna consciousness, this Satyam Bruyat, Priyam Bruyat, Ma Bruyat, Satyam Apriyam, this Manusmriti standard doesn't apply, especially when we preach Krishna consciousness. Preaching Krishna consciousness often entails uh, speaking truth to those who are not ready to hear it, and that's why it could be unpalatable to them. So in that case, should we stop preaching? No, that's not the point. But the point is that as much as possible, even in Krishna consciousness, we share the truth in a way people can appreciate it at their level. There is always this Deshakala Patra consideration, and we should surely follow this. Sometimes if you speak truth, so that may be technically correct, but it may be practically nonsense, because you are speaking something which is not necessary at that particular level of the person at that particular time. So in general also in communication they speak about three criteria to judge any speech. You should see whether it is right, whether first of all what you are sharing is right, or is it a rumor. We should be very sure that it's a right news and it's not untruth, or it's not just a rumor. Then we should also see, apart from being right, whether it is kind. Is it being spoken in a very proper, gentle manner, in a kind manner? you know Otherwise we may speak truth, but it is so bitter that person wants to turn away from the Krishna consciousness or devotees. So then that is not serving the purpose. And third is also whether it is necessary. Sometimes something could be right, something could be kind, but it may not be necessary actually. You may not have to speak that particular thing there. So we should also see that whether it is necessary. So from that angle, Niti also speaks about how one should, if one can avoid being the message giver of a bad news, one should avoid it, like that, because anyway misery will come in the people's lives. So from this angle also, like we see sometimes that there is so much of panic that gets created in a miserable situation, like current pandemic or something going on, like outbreaks like this and all. So Mahabharata does speak in Niti about one should not advertise the causes of misery actually. So by speaking a lot and by doing a great advertisement of misery, we actually add in people's misery, add in people's fear, add in people's anxiety. So to give a situations understanding so that people can be warned, people can be safeguarded, that is one aspect. But we see that much of the advertisement that happens even by media is more for creating a further panic and creating a news or making something sensational and all that. So for that, they are very eager to share the bad news, with people and all. So what is the point is Niti actually says that one should not discuss something that is extremely unpalatable. If it's extremely needed, then the right kind and necessary way one should do it. But then, yeah, in general, distress or any unpalatable news should not be much spoken and discussed. This is why even acharyas say that we as devotees don't discuss much pastimes of disappearance of Krishna or disappearance of Lord Rama, or such pastimes of Lord's disappearance, because naturally devotees don't relish these pastimes very much. They feel a great distress to hear about Lord's disappearance. And well, there is why there is then commentary written, and why so much of discussion is there in the Canto 11's pastimes. So point is, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that in order to describe certain tattva, to give a clear understanding about how Lord's departure is also transcendental, from that angle, those things are discussed like that. But in general, you see how much is the talk about Lord's pastimes of appearance and Lord's pastimes of his wonderful pastimes and all, and how much there is talk, or there are books written over Lord's disappearance. So from that angle, although we understand that Lord's pastimes are completely transcendental, but still as devotees, there is this natural devotional feeling of being distressed to hear Lord's disappearance, or to hear about the distress of devotees. And that's why these talks are usually not much there in the devotee circles, or even in general, Niti doesn't talk much about sharing people's misery and spreading it around. Okay, so yes. Kanchit kalamatha vatsit satkrito deva vatsukham bhratur jeshthasya shreyaskrit sarvesham sukham. Thus, Mahatma Vidura, being treated just like a godly person by his kinsmen, remained there for a certain period just to rectify the mentality of his eldest brother, and in this way bring happiness to all others. So, Kanchit Kalam Athavatsit, he stayed there for some time, he spent there some time. Satkruto Devavat Sukham, and in his stay there, he was well treated like Devavat, like he was treated like a demigod. He was treated like a celestial being, godly personality. So why did he stay there? Bhratur Jeshthasya Shreyaskrit, because he was actually Shreyaskrit, Hitopadeshta. He was actually instructor in well-being of his elder brother, that is Dhritarashtra. He wanted to do good to Dhritarashtra, and that's why he stayed there in the palace for some time. Sarvesham Sukhamavahan, and while staying there, he actually pleased everybody, caused a great happiness to all others also, because he was a saintly being who was loved by the all. So, point is, Prabhupada talks about how Vidura was respected like a personality from heaven. This is the way great devotees are to be treated. And later, Prabhupada says about why did he stay, Vidura stay in the palace for such a long time. After he came back, I mean, at least some time he stayed. So if he had taken for Vanaprastha ashram already, how is that he came back and stayed in the palace? Because a Vanaprastha is not supposed to come back, especially the man. He is supposed to just go further for perfection of his life to sannyasa ashram, like that. So why is that Mahatma Vidur came back actually? So it is said Shreyaskrit. He was his. He was extremely great well-wisher of his elder brother Dhritarashtra. He had seen how Dhritarashtra had become so shameless and was so much attached to the royal comforts that, in spite of so many of his relatives dead, all his sons dead, still he was sticking around the palace, enjoying the royal facilities given by Yudhishthir Maharaj. So Vidura did not at all approve this thing, and he really wanted to knock Dhritarashtra out of his zone of comfortable life. And that's why he stayed there to instruct him very heavily and inspire him to leave the palace and go for life of self-realization. So that's why he stayed there. Otherwise, there is no reason why personalities like Vidura, who have already accepted renounced order of life, should go and stay back in the palace again. Prabhupada says that. This is not the nature of saintly persons, right? Even in Bhagavatam, we hear about Shukdev Goswami in the 4th chapter of first canto. It is said that this person, Shukdev, he just stayed in the house of a householder till the time in the morning the cow was milked. Sa godohan matram hi griheshu grahamedhinam avekshate mahabhagas tirthi kurvan stadashramam. It is said. He just for that godohan matra samay, only for the time of when cow was getting milked, he used to stay there and accept some milk, and in that much time he would actually tirthi kurvan stadashramam, of that householder's house he would turn into ashrama, a real place where Krishna was in center by his instructions, by his association. So that's the nature. Even Vidura himself later, before, in his talks to Maitreya in 3rd canto, he says about this: Janasya Krishnad Vimukhasya Daivad Adharmashilasya Sudukhitasya Anugraha Yeha Charanti Nonam Bhutani Bhavyani Janardanas. Janardanasya Bhavyani Bhutani, those who are great devotees of the Lord, why do they wander in this world? Anugrahaya, just to actually bestow mercy on those who are householders, who are actually, especially it's talking about those householders who are Krishna Vimukha, those who are, they have turned away from the Lord, and that's why they are suffering. So in order to give them the association and bring them closer to the Lord's lotus feet, that's why these people go to the house of householders. So same way here we see that even Vidura stayed back in the palace after renunciation, just so that he wanted to bring this Dhritarashtra on the path of self-realization, who had become sort of so attached to all the household and royal comforts like that. So Prabhupada says that this is the duty of great souls like Vidura, and that's why one should hear from such realized souls. And if one hears continuously, in the last line he says, one can attain the perfect stage of self-realization. So that's why such great souls like Vidura, they are actually extremely valuable, because they, by their mercy only, somebody who is very much attached to material life can be inspired to come out. Okay, so how could Vidura instruct Dhritarashtra, or even for that matter, whatever he spoke was even heard by Yudhishthir. So what was his qualification in instructing kings like Dhritarashtra or Yudhishthir Maharaj is spoken in the next verse. Abhibrad aryama dandam yathavadagha karishu yavadhara shudratvam shapad varsha shatam yamaha. As long as Vidura played the part of a Shudra, being cursed by Manduka Muni, Aryama officiated at the post of Yamaraja to punish those who committed sinful acts. So this is the real identity of Vidura being revealed. Of course, Prabhupada reveals this identity in the first verse of this chapter itself, but in the verse, this is being revealed over here. In the chapter, Abhibrad Aryama Dandam Yathavadagharishu. So because this Vidura was none other than the great Mahajan Yamaraj, who had received a curse from Manduka Muni or Mandavya Muni, so that because of which he would have Shudratvam, Shudra birth for some little more than 100 years. So for the time being, when these 100 years here on the earthly planet were being spent by Yamaraj in the form of Vidura. So the charge of Yamaraj to punish the sinful souls was taken by Aryama. Aryama is the, as you know, the presiding deity, the chief of the Pitas, Pitruloka. Pitruloka's chief is Aryama, and Aryama acted on behalf of Yamaraj as the Dandadhara, as the one who is actually the punisher of the sinful souls. So because Vidura was actually a Mahajan, Yamaraj, so naturally he was most qualified to instruct anyone for that matter, Yudhishthir Maharaj or Dhritarashtra, any one of them like that. So what Prabhupada says is he just addresses this particular issue in this. So he himself raises a question, Prabhupada, in his purport second line. He says that how could he, means Vidura, occupy the post of a preacher to instruct such learned kings and Kshatriyas as Dhritarashtra and Maharaj Yudhishthira? So actually this purport is literally ditto translation of Sridhar Swami's commentary. Even in terms of akshepa, that is the question that is raised by Sridhar Swami, the same question Prabhupada also translates in his purport. And then there is samadhana, akshepasya samadhanam. So the answer that Sridhar Swami gives, Prabhupada also repeats the answer in his purport. So literally it's a translation of Sridhar Swami's commentary like that. Prabhupada does make an additional point saying that although, Vidura was Yamaraj surely, but even if you take somebody else who is qualified pure devotee and then he's spiritually enlightened person, even though he might be a Shudra, but if he's taken lessons from great souls and become an authority, so then such a person is qualified to instruct anyone for that matter. So, Kiba Vipra Kiba Nyasi Shudra Kenena Jai Krishna Tattva Vetta Sei Guru Hai. So this is the point Prabhupada also brings up like that. But here it was surely Yamaraj. So that's why Vidura was most qualified to instruct all these people. Yes, so you know that story of Manduka Muni, Mandava Muni. The story is there in Puranas where Manduka Muni was one time meditating in his ashram and some of the thieves entered in his ashram. So when the Rajbhatas, the king's soldiers, they came to catch the thieves, they also caught the sage and took away, thinking that he must have also been an accomplice in their theft. So when the matter went to those who were the lawmakers over there, they punished all the thieves along with even the sage like that. And what was the punishment? Unko sabko suli pe chada diya. They were put on the shula like that. So it's a very intensely painful punishment like that. But then meanwhile, the news came to, they were all put on the shula, but then the news went to a king, the king of that region, saying that actually Manduk Muni is also put on shula because of this particular thing. So immediately king told that he should be freed because he is a sage. King recognized him as a sage like that. And then when in this manner Manduka Muni was freed, so Manduka Muni actually got so upset that Manduka Muni straight away went to Yamaraj and wanted to know why he was punished like that. So when he asked Yamaraj that why I was punished like this when I have not committed any kind of crime, I was not part of that theft. So Yamaraj said that actually in your childhood you had pierced one particular insect, shalabha, grasshopper, Prabhupada says, with a very sharp stick. So in your childhood you had done that, so that's why you were also pierced by shula for some time. So hearing this, Manduka Muni got so angry, saying that in childhood one is very ignoramus of things, and how can you punish so severely for my childhood, sin? So he cursed Yamaraj that you have acted like a Shudra, not knowing what punishment to be given to whom, so you be a Shudra for 100 years. But of course, we know that Yamaraj is a pure devotee, so how can such kind of curse take effect on him for apparently actually no mistake? So this was not by that. This was Lord's arrangement. Lord Yamraj was very much tired of actually offering punishments to sinful souls, and he wanted to take a break and preach the glories of the Lord. So that's how Lord arranged that this curse comes to him, and he takes an appearance on the earthly planet so that he can preach his glories for 100 years, slightly more than 100 years. So in this manner, this was the reason why Yamraj had become Vidura. So in this way, he was actually ready to instruct Dhritarashtra. Yudhishthiro labdharajo drishtva pautram kulandharam bhratrubhirlokapala mumude paraya shriya. Having won his kingdom and observed the birth of one grandson competent to continue the noble tradition of his family, Maharaj Yudhishthir reigned peacefully and enjoyed uncommon opulence in cooperation with his younger brothers, who were all expert administrators to the common people. So in this manner, Yudhishthir, after he had received the kingdom, he was ruling now, and he was ruling happily with a great royal opulence and with his great brothers who were very expert administrators. But especially Yudhishthir was very happy to see his grandson, who was a Kulandhara, who was actually just suitable person to carry on the legacy Kulandhara of his great dynasty, Yudhishthir's great dynasty. So he was very, very happy to have him. Although actually Prabhupada says in purport that Yudhishthir was really very happy, really very distressed even before war and after the war, because before the war he didn't want to fight such a ghastly war and kill his brothers, and but it was unavoidable. It was plan of the Lord, and it did happen finally. So many of his relatives were killed, all his cousin brothers were killed. So he was actually in great distress because of such mass killing like that. But especially after all these disturbing conditions, and when the kingdom was re-established, in the virtuous style, so he was very happy to have Parikshit as his grandson, who would actually carry the great legacy of his kingdom. So in this manner, that is talked about. So this is talked about just to speak about how some time had passed, Yudhishthir ruling in this fashion, and then now there was the time when Dhritarashtra had become extremely old, and now he should have been leaving the house and accept the life of renunciation, like that. So this is when Vidura is appearing on the scene like that. So, and Vidura is going to instruct Dhritarashtra to inspire him to take up the life of renunciation. Evam griheshu saktanam pramattanam tadhihaya atyakramadavidyatah kalah paramadustarah. Insurmountable eternal time imperceptibly overcomes those who are too much attached to family affairs and are always engrossed in their thought. So in this manner, for those who were very attached to their household life, griheshu saktanam pramattanam tadhihaya, and those who are very insanely attached in such thoughts of enjoyment of household life, the great time appears, the great Kala, destroyer of everything, appears, in a very imperceptible way, in a way that nobody can understand. And Paramadustara, which is insurmountable, imperceptible and insurmountable. Prabhupada translates very beautifully. So that time appeared here also in the case of all the people who were attached to the household life. So actually, after Yudhishthir's spending his time in royal opulence, this verse comes. So it may appear like it's talking about, whether it is talking about Pandavas and Yudhishthir, so not. It is not talking about Pandavas and Yudhishthir, but it is talking about people like Dhritarashtra. So this verse is talking about people like Dhritarashtra. So Dhritarashtra and such other people who were very attached to the household, royal opulence. And in the thought of them, that royal opulence only, they were leading their life. But then here arose the time, the Kala, which is actually there to destroy everything. You know? So this is what is talked about, especially for those people who are very greatly attached to the household life, with that kind of mentality. So Prabhupada says here that he explains the mentality of an attached householder. This is not to condemn a householder, but to condemn an attached householder. So devotees, whether they are householders or whether they are brahmacharis, they are actually aniketaha. It is said, Krishna says, aniketaha sthiramati in Bhagavad Gita, that actually they are only attached to the real abode of the Lord, that is, the spiritual world. Although they may possess great houses, great wealth, and all that, but their real attachment is to the eternal home, that is the spiritual world. But typical materialistic householder, what is his mentality? Prabhupada says, I am now happy. He's talking about how a mundane person who is attached to household speaks. I am now happy. I have everything in order. My bank balance is quite enough. I can now give my children enough estate. I am now successful. The poor beggar sannyasis depend on God, but they come to beg from me. Therefore, I am more than the supreme God. These are some of the thoughts which engross the insanely attached householder who is blind to the passing of eternal time. So this is how, we see that this is the mentality of somebody who is too much attached to household life. But such a person forgets that actually time is going to appear imperceptibly and insurmountably, and knock him out of the orbit of material existence. I mean, especially out of his home and comfort, and throw him again back in the cycle of material existence, like that. So this is the nature of time. Actually, time destroys everything. So although somebody wants it, somebody doesn't want it, finally time is the one which comes to destroy everything. But especially the nature of material world is like that, that when we are enjoying the material life, the time, nobody realizes how the time goes. Even 100 years pass like they have passed. I mean, some few minutes have passed, like that. It's very peculiar. When somebody is enjoying the material life, it looks like he is going to live eternal. But then suddenly, the time appears. Muchkunda Maharaj in his prayers to Lord Krishna in 10th canto, he says that, Tvam apramattah sahasabhipadyase kshullelihano, he says that just as there is this snake which is licking its fangs, seeing a mouse, similarly, a jiva is compared like a mouse, and Kala appears licking its fangs. Because a jiva might be, because a living entity might be pramatta, he is intoxicated by material life, but Lord, as the form of Kala, is apramatta. He is ever alert. And, in that manner, he comes by licking its fangs just to attack a mouse, which is compared to a jiva, like that. So similarly, in this case also, although Dhritarashtra was happily going on enjoying royal comfort, the time appeared, and that's why Vidura was there to help him to come out of this attachment. But this kind of illusion obviously is not there for those who are devotees of the Lord. Prabhupada says that in second paragraph. Such illusion cannot work on one who is awake in the devotional service of the Lord. So just like Yudhishthir Maharaj and all that, because all of them, they were actually always attached to Krishna and his service, right? Prabhupada makes a reference to that prior verse that we studied. Kimte kama surasparha mukunda manaso dvija adhijahru mudam radnya kshuditasya yathetare. So actually kings like Yudhishthir, they are never attached to the household opulence, be it be emperor of the planet also, because it was like Kshuditasya tathetare. his mind was so much Mukunda Manasa, it is said. He was such a Mukunda Mana, he was having so much consciousness absorbed in Lord Mukunda that it was like a hungry person is not satisfied by anything else. Similarly, Yudhishthir was not satisfied by anything but Lord Seva, Lord service, Nam Rup Gunal Lila and Seva. So this was his very special position like that. Okay, so now begins the instructions of Vidura to Dhritarashtra, especially because he wanted Dhritarashtra to now literally leave this so-called comfortable position and go for renunciation. Vidurastadabhipretya Dhritarashtram abhashata Rajan nirgamyatam shighram pashyedam bhayamagatam. Mahatma Vidura knew all this, and therefore he addressed Dhritarashtra, saying, "My dear king, please get out of here immediately. Do not delay. Just see how fear has overtaken you." So Vidura saw this, that the time of death of Dhritarashtra was nearby, and now it was very important that he leaves the palace and accepts the life of renunciation. So he said, "Raja nirgamyatam shighram." Hey, O king, please get out immediately. Please quickly get out of here. Pashya idam bhayamagatam. Just see how this greatly fearful, the great fear, has overtaken you. Just see how this kala has arrived and you are so much fearful like that. So he addressed Dhritarashtra as Rajan, although Dhritarashtra was not Raja, right? Yudhishthir was Raja. So he addressed Dhritarashtra as Raja because actually he was king only in the namesake. He was considering himself as the king, but actually he was not the king. In fact, what to speak of Dhritarashtra or Yudhishthir, the real king in this world is actually the king, the Kala, the Ishwar, the Lord. So he is the real king. Prabhupada says this in the purport, that Vidura sarcastically addressed Dhritarashtra as the king, because he was not actually. Everybody thinks himself to be a king in this world. His kingdom may be a small house, whatever, one hall and kitchen, that may be his kingdom, or his kingdom may be like the entire, Jambudvip or entire existence. But then everybody in this world thinks himself to be the king, although they are not, because soon the real king, actually, which is the eternal time, Ishvara, Kala, that Kala will knock a person out of his whatever place he is in. So that's why there is no king in this world. So when he addressed Dhritarashtra as king, that was sarcastic, actually saying that you are still considering yourself as king. Please get out of here. You are no longer a king, and you should actually understand that the time has come for you to leave, like that. But we see that Dhritarashtra was very attached, and this kind of upadesh was needed for him by Vidura. Dhritarashtra, although all his sons were killed, all his relatives were dead, still Dhritarashtra continued considering that it was rightful for him to stay under the care of his nephew, that is Yudhishthir. And whatever Yudhishthir royal opulence Yudhishthir was offering, he was happily accepting it, thinking that yes, he deserves it. So this is exactly the mentality of what is called as Dhrita Rashtra. Literally, Dhrita Rashtra, Dhritam Rashtram Yena Saha Dhrita Rashtra. The meaning of Dhrita Rashtra is one who is extremely attached to the Rashtra, the kingdom. One who is holding the kingdom. जिसने राष्ट्र को पकड़ के रखा है, that is Dhritarashtra. So means he was so attached to the throne and so attached to the kingdom, he was not ready to leave only. Even after so many things had happened, all his sons were killed, and still he just was so attached to staying there and enjoying royal opulence. So that's why he spoke very heavily, Vidura, to him. In fact, Prabhupada also makes a reference to this English proverb towards the end of the purport, that time and tide wait for none. You know, so Prabhupada says that there was this celebrated English king who wanted to order time and tide. So he's talking about a king called Canute the Great. You know, this was a British king in 12th century, and there's an episode in which he once wanted to show actually that how he is not the real controller. So he ordered the tide to stop, but then can the tide stop? No, time and tide, they don't stop, they don't wait for anybody. You know, so that's how the English phrase became tide and time and tide wait for none. You know, so actually Prabhupada's knowledge of British history and British literature is very impressive. You see that in many times in purport, Prabhupada's explanation of English phrases, English history, uh, uh, English statements is quite very well. Actually, he had studied in Scottish Churches College and he knew very good English literature. So many times in his purport, you find that he refers to very precisely to all those phrases and adages of English poets. Okay. प्रतिक्रिया न यस्येह कुतश्चित् कर्हिचित् प्रभो स एष भगवान् कालः सर्वेषां न समागतः. This frightful situation cannot be remedied by any person in this material world. My Lord, it is the Supreme Personality of Godhead as eternal time that has approached us all. You know. So if Dhritarashtra were to say, okay, the time has come, but we will counter it, we will fight back with the time. So, Vidura is saying, Pratikriya na yasyeha kutaschit karhichit prabho. Hey, Dhritarashtra, there is no counter action that can be done to this Kala. Nobody can counter it, you know. And because that Kala is Bhagavan Kala, he is actually the most powerful personality of Godhead himself. So that's why nothing can be done. You know, anybody, everybody, when the Kala arrives, they have to submit. You can't do any counter action, any pratikriya like that, you know. So this is the point, right? We see that Prabhupada also speaks about this, that nobody can avoid when the Kala appears. You know, Prabhupada says that in the first paragraph, there is no superior power which can check the cruel hands of death. So Prabhupada compares death to a supreme judge, which can send supreme judgment, or before that it can summon call. It can summon for coming in the court. So what he means is actually Kala sends its messages and finally also its final verdict in terms of death. You know? One time a person, when his death arrived, then he said to the death, how can you come without any intimation? Is it a good etiquette to come without intimation? I mean, this is a lok katha. This is a lok katha that is shared. So that person asked death, how can you come without intimation? It's not a good etiquette to come like that without intimation. So death said to him, actually, I sent you so many letters, but you never read them. So he said, really? What letters? When did you send me any letters? So he said, the death said, I sent you first letter when your hairs became white. You know, that was my first letter. Then again, I sent another letter when, you know, your teeth started falling. And then I sent another letter when your entire skin started becoming wrinkled. And my final letter came when your whole body became like a bow, like a dhanusha, you know, it became vakra. So four letters I sent you, but you never paid any heed to read them. So that's why finally I have come myself to fetch you like that. So that's the point Prabhupada is saying also. No one can refuse to accept either summon calls or supreme judgment of time. So supreme judgment is the death, and summon calls are all this old age and, you know, other symptoms of old age like that. So that's how was the situation of Dhritarashtra also like that. Prabhupada says even in the second paragraph that even Hiranyakashipu tried to check the death, but even he could not do. So who can stop death actually? Even when he asked for immortality to Brahma, Brahmaji said, I am myself not immortal. What can I offer you immortality? So that's why this is called as Bhagavan Kala. Kala is the most powerful. Nobody can counter it in any way. So even, yeah, we see this even for that matter. Bhishma Dev says this, right? Sarvam kalakatam manye bhavatam chayada priyam sapalo yadvashe loko vayoriva ghanavali. He said, just as the Vayu, the great wind, drives all the clouds, Vayoriva Ghanavali. Clouds don't have a freedom on their own. They are driven by the wind. So similarly, in this world, all the jivas, they have to accept the dictation of time. Nobody can avoid it like that. Yena chaivabhipanno yam pranay priyatamairapi jana sadyo viyujeta kimutanyairdhanadibhi. But if Dhritarashtra were to say, but what will happen if I have to give up my wife, my kingdom, and my wealth and all that? So in order to answer that, this verse is said. Translation is, whoever is under the influence of Supreme Kala, eternal time, must surrender his most dear life, and what to speak of other things, such as wealth, honor, children, land, and home. So forget about dhanadibhi, that is wife and children and land and house and all that. Even your life will be taken away. One's life heirs is the most dear part of one's life. I mean, one loves the life heirs most dearly. So even that life heir will be taken away by death. So what to speak of all other things like a house and wife and children and wealth and all that. So that's what is spoken. Prabhupada in purport talks about a great Indian scientist busy in plan making business was suddenly called by Invincible Eternal Time, when he was going to attend the important meeting of planning commission. So this is Meghnad Saha, that this was the scientist whom Prabhupada is referring, who, died on the way of his meeting to planning commission. This is in 1956. So Prabhupada is referring to that part of history. So he also talks about so many wealthy people dying in the partition when Pakistan and Hindustan were made the partition of India. And so many people, so many rich people, even they lost all their property and honor and everything. So, how is this actually? They were powerful people, wealthy people, but we see that this is how time is imperceptible and unconquerable. By the influence of time, even those people became paupers and they lost everything, although they had great wealth and all that. So this is how all kingdoms, all great empires, they all set, by the passage of time, and nobody can do anything over there like that. In fact, only Lord can protect. Prabhupada says that also, in his purport. So anybody who wants to take a shelter of anything else will not survive. Actually, only Lord can protect. So now in 7 verses, he speaks very strongly to Dhritarashtra, especially inspiring him for renunciation. So we'll quickly go through these statements and then take some questions. We'll pause. So these are 7 verses which are especially spoken to inspire Vairagya in Dhritarashtra. So you see, same Vidura who did not want to give the unpalatable news of Krishna's disappearance because he was so sensitive. He didn't want to put Pandavas in distress, or anyone for that matter in distress. But that same Vidura is now going to speak very harshly, very severely to Dhritarashtra. So how is that? So this is the personality of pure devotees. They can be Vajradapi Kathoram and Kusmadapi Komalam. Just as it behooves. It was needed for Dhritarashtra to hear such heavy words to knock him out of his material comfort. So that's why Vidura spoke, because this was needed. So he did this as a service, you know. Otherwise, Vidura is most gentle, pure devotee of the Lord, you know, who doesn't want to give any distress to anybody. But for Dhritarashtra, it was very much needed. Text 21. Pitru bhratru surut putra hataste vigatam vayam atma cha jaraya grastah parageham upasase. Your father, brother, well-wishers and sons are all dead and passed away. You yourself have expended the major portion of your life. Your body is now overtaken by invalidity, and you are living in the home of another. So Vidura spoke to Dhritarashtra straight, you know, saying that actually your father is dead. You know, Vichitra Virya was dead long back. All your brothers are dead. I mean, Pandu was dead, especially long back. And then Surit Putra, your relatives are dead. Especially all your sons are dead. Even you have become invalid. You have come to become an old man now. And your body, we can see that body is racked by all invalidity and old age. And you are staying in a house of another man. You know, you are not even a king. You are staying in another man's house, Yudhishthir's house, and being maintained by him. So is this a very glorious position for you? You know, he is saying in this manner, Vidura, like that. So just as his name suggested, we see that Dhritarashtra was staying in the house, although staying in the palace of Hastinapur, even though all his relatives were dead. In fact, all his sons were dead, his relatives were dead, his Bhishma Deva, Dronacharya, well-wishers like Karna were dead. Everybody was dead. But in spite of this, so much was his attachment to live that Dhritarashtra continued to stay. So that's why Vidura is speaking to him very, very heavily. You know, actually, friend, children, father, brother, state, who can protect in this world? Prabhupada says that nobody can protect. You know, only Supreme Lord can protect one, like that. And seeking anybody else's protection is actually foolishness. This is also spoken by demigods in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where they say that avismitam tam paripurna kamam svenaiva labhena samam prashantam vinopasarpatya parabhibalisha shvalambulena tititarti sindhum. So they say that trying to cross over this ocean of material existence, trying to take shelter in protection of anybody else than Supreme Lord is like trying to catch a dog's tail and try to cross an ocean. Can you cross an ocean by holding a dog's tail? Shvalangolena tiritarti sindhum. So by catching a dog's tail, what will happen actually? Even the dog cannot swim across ocean, and even the person who is catching the tail cannot swim across ocean. So similarly, anything in this world is like that. All the shelters are temporary. They can't afford us actual protection. Finally, person is alone. He comes alone in this world and leaves also alone. You know, this is the point. Vidura continues, Andhapureva badhiro manda pradnyascha sampratam vishirnadanto mandagni saraga kapamudvahan. You have been blind from your very birth, and recently you have become hard of hearing. Your memory is shortened and your intelligence is disturbed. Your teeth are loose, your liver is defective, and you are coughing up mucus. So he very vividly describes the condition of Dhritarashtra's body. He says that Andha Puraeva, you are blind from birth only. Before only you were blind. Now you have even become Vadhira. You have become even Badhira. You are not able to hear. Typically, old age comes in, person is not able to see, a person is not able to hear. So you have become Vadhira or Badhira. Manda Pradnyascha Sampratam, even your memory is not there, memory is fading. It's not like before, right? This happens in the old age. Vishirna Danto, you know, you have lost your teeth, like that. The teeth are loosened or some of them are lost, like that. Mandagni, there is no agni in the stomach. Your liver is action is decreased. Saragah kapham udvahan, and you are always coughing, and that too making a sound always. When there is a lot of cough in the throat, there is a particular sound that comes. So you are coughing like that, making that sound. So this is your precarious condition. Still you want to stay in this palace, being attached to the royal opulence, like that. So these are all signs of apakshaya, dwindling of the body. Prabhupada says this is just before death. All these things, this dwindling of the body happens, like that. And that's why somebody like Vidura is needed to speak such things and strongly and inspire people for renounced order of life. Prabhupada says this in purport. Saints and sages like Vidura approach such foolish men. This is towards the end, to awaken them to the real situation. But they take such sadhus and saints as parasites of society. And all of them refuse to hear the words of such sadhus and saints, although they welcome show bottle sadhus and so-called saints who can satisfy their senses. So sometimes we see this thing, right? People, although some sadhu may want to instruct them and inspire them, they think that why is he instructing me? He is himself a parasite on society, and I am so responsible. Why is he instructing me? First, you should be responsible like me. Then you have a right to instruct, like that. So that is very unfortunate, actually. The sadhu is trying to inspire him from his attachments and give up his attachments and take up to life of devotional service, but then such a person considers sadhu only as parasite. So that is the unfortunate situation, like that. But otherwise, to tell this real truth, we do need actually sadhus like Vidura, and that's how, if this is the situation of material body, I mean, Dhritarashtra's situation, that's the situation which will happen to everybody. As we grow old, we see that the sensory faculties, mental faculties, they go on dwindling, right? Shankaracharya also says that angam galitam palitam mundam dashana vihina jatam tundam vruddho yati grihitva dandam tadapina munchati asha pindam. He says that in the old age, angam galitam, body starts melting away, palitam mundam, the hairs on the head, they start falling away. Dashana vihnam jatam tundam, the whole mouth becomes devoid of all the 32 teeth, and then Vruddho yati grahitva dandam. So sometimes you see some old man like that, materialistic old man with such symptoms. But tadapena munchati asha pindam. Still one wants to live, still one wants to enjoy life, see further generations and see their marriages and this and that, without thinking about his own life, what is going to happen to him after death. So especially about a non-devotee materialist, this is being spoken, like that. So that's why if this is going to be the situation of material body, Chanakya Pandit says, Sannimitte varam tyago vinashe niyate sati. See, if anyway body is going to dwindle like this, why not voluntarily give it for the service of Supreme? Sannimitte varam tyago. इस सत के निमित्त के लिए त्याग जो है वो वर है, वो उत्कृष्ट है. विनाशे नियते सती. जब विनाश सुनिश्चित ही है, तो इस शरीर को क्यों न भगवान की सेवा के अंतर्गत इस शरीर को लगाएं. So that's what is even recommendation by Chanakya Pandit. He continues, Vidura. Aho mahiyasi chantor जीविताशा यथा भवान bhimapavarjitam pindam adatte grihapalavat. Alas, how powerful are the hopes of a living being to continue his life. Verily, you are living just like a household dog and are eating remnants of food given by Bhima. So sadhu, literally, one who cuts, one who speaks very strong words. So Vidura is acting like a sadhu in its literal sense. So he's saying, Aho mahiyasi jantor jivitasha yatha bhava. Alas, alas, just see how this Jantu, how a living entity desires to live, how indefatigable is that desire. Just like you are actually staying here, eating the food remnants given by Bhima, Pindam Adatte, giving the food remnants given by Bhima, Grahapalavat, like a dog, you know, literally, I mean, verse is saying that भीम ने फेंके हुए टुकड़ों पे पलने वाले कुत्ते की तरह तुम रह रहे हो. Actually, it's quite a strong speaking that he is doing, right? Especially, he reminded him of Bhima. He reminded Dhritarashtra of Bhima. This is the same person who killed all your sons. All 100 sons were killed by Bhima. And that person who killed all your sons, he is throwing some tukde, some remnants of food, pindam. He's using such words. You see, he's not even saying prasadam or something. He's saying pindam. He's throwing some food at you, and you are like a dog. You are eating this food. What an abominable condition! What a disgusting life that you are leading. That one who has killed your sons, your enemy, you are taking the food given by him and thinking yourself to be very fortunate. So Prabhupada says that this is how a sadhu speaks. He never flatters king or rich men like that. So this was condition of Dhritarashtra. Although he had been defeated by Bhima and Yudhishthir and all that, and you remember that episode when the kingdom was to be handed over to Yudhishthir after Kurukshetra. So when they all went to meet Dhritarashtra, so Dhritarashtra, when he wanted to embrace all the Pandavas, especially with Bhima, he was so angry for killing all his sons that he wanted to embrace Bhima and crush him down to death. But then Krishna was there, who is, the Lord, who is the most Bhakta Vatsala. He is the most loving to his devotees. So Krishna understood the Dhritarashtra intention, and what he said is, he just signaled Bhima that his statue is put forth, the statue on which Duryodhana used to practice, that statue of metal that was put in front of Dhritarashtra. And Dhritarashtra was so angry, even this is after Kurukshetra war, when everything is over. So he embraced that statue, and such was the power of Dhritarashtra. He crushed it and powdered that statue completely. And all were aghast seeing it. What would be Bhima's condition at that point if he was embracing Bhima? So then after this, of course, Dhritarashtra feels very sorry and starts crying and begs forgiveness like that. But then point is that same Bhima at whom he was so angry, that Bhima had actually now been offering him some food. And Vidura chastised Dhritarashtra, saying, "What is your life? Such such an abominable life that you are accepting food given by Bhima like a dog. What all things you have not done to them? You tried to kill them, torture them." He says that in the next words. Agnir nisrishto dattascha garodarashcha dushita ritam kshetram dhanam gesham taddatte rasubhikiyat. There is no need to live a degraded life and subsist on the charity of those whom you tried to kill by arson and poisoning. You have also insulted one of their wives and usurped their kingdom and wealth. So he reminded all the evil doings that Dhritarashtra did to them. Agnir Nisrishto, he tried to burn Pandavas and Kunti Devi in that Lakshagraha. Dattascha Garo, he tried to poison Bhima, administer poison to Bhima. And Darashtra Dushita, he also did not stop Duryodhana and company to try to disrobe Draupadi and thus insult such a devoted and great devotee like Draupadi. Ritam kshetram dhanam yesham, and you stripped them away from their all land, their kingdom, and their great wealth that they had in their uh, Indraprastha. And now from these people only you are taking favors, you are taking food, you are taking all the royal facilities. What abominable life is this? Asubhi kiyat prayojanam. By maintaining your life in such a manner, actually, why should you maintain such a life? What's the point in living such a life where you are now taking favors from the very people whom you tried to kill, in this particular manner, like that. So Prabhupada says in purport that at this point in Mahabharata, Vidura is talking to just one Dhritarashtra, but so many Dhritarashtras are there in Kali Yuga now, in every house, where person till the last fag end of his life, he just wants to be in mundane affair, materialistic affairs, and they don't want to dedicate their life fully in the Lord's service, or for the process of Krishna consciousness. Especially he talks about politicians who have such attachment, terrible attachment for their posts and positions, and they don't want to leave their chair till the time they are, literally they themselves die or they are killed by somebody else. So Prabhupada says that very strong statement. He says to stick to family life to the end of one's human life is the grossest type of degradation, and there is an absolute need for the Viduras to educate such Dhritarashtras, even at the present moment. Tasyapi tava dehoyam kripanasya jijibishoh paretyanichhato jirno jarayavasasi iva. Despite your unwillingness to die and your desire to live, even at the cost of honor and prestige, your miserly body will certainly dwindle and deteriorate like an old garment. So although you are leading such an abominable life, but still you want to live. Tasyapi tava dehoyam. Even though you want to maintain such a body, but please know that this body is dwindling. Paraiti. It's dwindling. It's kshiyate. Even though you don't want it. Anichhato. Even though you don't want it, this body is becoming old and it's dwindling, just as the garments by the usage, they dwindle, they become torn, they deteriorate, and then this finally get completely destroyed, torn. So this is your condition also, although you don't want, but this is what is happening. We see that uh, your body is going to certainly dwindle and deteriorate like that. So Prabhupada speaks in purport about Kripana and Brahmana. That is the discussion he speaks at many points, many places. Even in Bhagavad Gita, he speaks what is a Kripana and Brahmana. So especially somebody who is not utilizing his body for devotional service is known as Kripana. Why miserly? Because a miser does not know how to utilize his wealth. Although he has great wealth, his wealth is not utilized in welfare of his own or for welfare of others. Conjuice. So similarly, one who has got the great wealth of human form of life, but he doesn't use it for his own deliverance or for helping other people out, paropkar. So that's why such a person is known as Kripana. But instead of Kripana, one should be Brahmana, one who knows how to utilize that wealth in the service of the Lord and humanity this way. So this is the point. Vishwanath Chakravarti also makes a point that Vasasi here is in Dvivachana. It's in dual. So it meaning that just as two garments fall off or two garments get deteriorated. So what it refers, he says that two garments means Antariya and Uttariya. There is inner garment and outer garment. So by using the word Vasasi, actually what it means is he's pointing out that not only your gross body is dwindling, even your subtle body is dwindling. Both the things are dwindling. Wrinkles and gray hair, that is for gross body is dwindling, and not being able to remember, not being able to hear or see clearly, that happens because of dwindling of the antarchakshus, right, the internal senses that are there. subtle senses. So that's why he says that your both bodies are dwindling, just as the clothes also deteriorate. Okay, two more verses, 26. Gatasvatham deham virakto mukta bandhanah avidyat gatir jahyat savaidhira udaritah. He is called undisturbed who goes to an unknown remote place and freed from all obligations, quits his material body when it has become useless. So in this manner, for such a person who is gatasvartham imam deham, actually such a person who never utilized his body in the real swartha, in the real benefit of his life, that is spiritual life. So such a person now at the fag end of his life at least should become virakta and should give up this bondage of family life and become avidnyata gatihi. Means that he should go to a destination which nobody knows, without telling anybody, anything. He should just leave the house, and such a person is known as dhira. He says that, especially having not utilized his body in the real purpose of life, that is self-realization. Such a person now at least should become virakta and give up his familial attachment and go to a place where nobody knows where he has gone. So such a person is known as dhira. This is, in fact, he's speaking this in the manner of definition of dhira. Who is called a dhira? It is said, savai dhirah udaritah. Usko dhir kehte hai. One who does like this, one who gives up familial attachment and leaves, in this particular manner. So especially this is there that one should, if one can give up family life and go ahead on the path of self-realization without being disturbed, it is called dhira. But Prabhupada does say that this kind of renunciation especially is talked because of frustration in family life, like that. But this kind of renunciation can only sustain when one becomes, one accepts devotional service. This renunciation by frustration in familial attachment is good to begin with. That is the dhira platform, but then one has to also associate with devotees and accept devotional service. Then only such surrender can stabilize the renunciation of a person, like that. But at least he wanted that this Dhritarashtra becomes a dhira. He gives up now and goes ahead for self-realization. Now he speaks about another category of renunciants called as Narottama. He spoke about dhira, and now this next verse is talking about Narottama. Yah swakat parato veha jata nirveda atmavan ridhikritva harim gehat pravrajayet sa narottamaha. He is certainly a first-class man who awakens and understands, either by himself or from others, the falsity and misery of this material world, and thus leaves home and depends fully on personality of Godhead residing within his heart. So glorious is that Narottama. He is the first-class human being who gives up his familial attachment, holding Lord Hari in his heart. For devotional service, he accepts the renunciation or the path of no attachment, like that. So whether that renunciation is inspired by himself or inspired by association of another great soul, but somebody who becomes indifferent to material attachment, such a person, he goes away from the family attachment and holding the Lord in his heart, dedicates his life for the service of the Lord. So this transcendentalist and the prior dhira, these two different categories are there. Dhira is actually one who renounces only out of frustration in family life, while a Narottam is one who wants to expand his service to the Lord, and that's why he wants to give full time for the Lord. Prabhupada makes these two categories into three categories. We can say, like Prabhupada is explaining in this manner also, that dhira is one who is ready to stay away from family. When he takes sannyas, that's the next stage. And Narottam is the one who leaves home for performing bhakti, like that. So those are the three categories Prabhupada says, like that. So here idea was that uh, Dhritarashtra at least now accepts to be a dhira, because naturally he was not very much devoted to Supreme Lord. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur does say later that even the Upadesh of Vidura is of Bhakti Mishra Jnana and not exactly Bhakti. He instructed Dhritarashtra in Bhakti Mishra Jnana, which is a process of Jnanis actually. And that's how Dhritarashtra later could only achieve Mukti and not Prema. He could not achieve the Prema Bhakti, but he got liberation, which is a typical characteristic of Bhakti Mishra Jnana. There is difference between Bhakti Mishra Jnana and Jnana Mishra Bhakti. These two are different things. Bhakti Mishra Jnana, in which Jnana is prominent, and there is slightly some discussion about Bhakti because no path can be complete without Bhakti. But Bhakti Mishra Jnana means the destination is actually Mukti. The destination is especially impersonal, meditating on the impersonal Brahma and Moksha, like that. So that's the point. So here Dhritarashtra was actually spoken, uh, inspired by Vidura to at least accept that path of being a dhira and give up this life of familial attachment and proceed towards self-realization, like that. But that renunciation can get really perfected, Prabhupada says, when one becomes the devotee of Supreme Personality of Godhead, so in this particular manner, like that. So these two are the two categories or three categories, as Prabhupada says. So one is Atura Sannyasi. So Dhira is Atura Sannyasi, means he is very, he is sannyasi out of distress or anxiety, Aturta. So that is Dhira. And Bhakti Viveki is Narottama, one who renounces for expanding his service to Supreme Lord, that is Narottama. That's how these two categories are explained. Prabhupada splits that dhira into also one more category as dhira and sannyasi in that manner. Okay, so one more verse and then he just inspires now Dhritarashtra to leave. Atho dichim disham yatu swayajnata gatir bhavan ito rava prayashah kala pumsam guna vikarshanaha. Please therefore leave for the north immediately without letting your relatives know, for soon that time will approach which will diminish the good qualities of men. So in this manner, speaking in 7 verses very strongly to Dhritarashtra, Vidura inspired him that please now it's time for you. You must leave this palace of Hastinapur and go in the northern directions, into the Himalayas to practice the life of self-realization. Udichim disham yatu, go to the northern direction. Svaihi adnyat gatihi, and don't let anybody know when you are leaving, where you are leaving. Just leave in a way that nobody knows and go ahead for self-realization. If you don't do this, please know that soon the guna vikarshana kala, arvak. Actually, the time the Kali Yuga is now soon going to take over completely. Lord Krishna had already departed, and that's how Kali Yuga is surely going to take over. So the effect of the inspiration of renunciation that you are feeling right now, that will not stay. This is a curse of Kali Yuga, that even if somebody is inspired for something positive, that inspiration does not stay. It just withers away completely, like that. So that's why he is saying you are inspired now, immediately you leave for renunciation. Otherwise soon that Kali Yuga will take such a toll that your inspiration to practice spiritual life will be over, like that. So in this manner Vidura inspired him that Dhritarashtra should leave the house and now go ahead in this particular manner, like that. So after this Dhritarashtra leaves the palace to go to the north. So I would pause here and check if there are any questions on whatever we had discussed. So after that we can proceed. Yes, Prabhu, are there any questions? Any explanation? Okay, here is a question. Any explanation about why in Vedic culture people live to north? Like Dhritarashtra here, and later we see Pandavas. Yes, so this will also come in the next verse only, that actually traditionally for renunciation, north, the Himalayan regions were always very suitable, because these regions, especially these regions, had the forests, and they were not so much, at least certain regions in which the sages and renunciates practice, they were ideally suited for practicing renounced order of life. There were forests and all like that, and they were also very sattvic places, which are governed by sattvikta in the atmosphere itself, so that's how those who wanted to live for the practice of spiritual life, they always left in the direction of Himalayas, because these were very suitable places for practicing spiritual life, especially in the traditional aspects of renunciation. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Prabhupada does the quote and say that for Vaishnavas, it has always been the Vaishnav Tirthas, because Himalayas and all such, they might be liked by people who are traditional renunciates, especially those who are on the Dhyana Marga, but Vaishnavas always prefer tirthas like Vrindavan and Jagannath Puri and all. Prabhupada does say that particular thing like that. So even Yudhishthir and all, he went for Himalayas and all, because traditional aspect of renunciation, jnana, is being demonstrated by all of them. And sometimes we do see Uddhava and all such people also going to Badrikashram, where obviously there is Lord Badri Narayan, there is Nar Narayan, so that's why to take his association also, Uddhava speaks about this, that he also goes to northern direction and especially to Badrikashram, taking association of Nar Narayan Rishi. So point is, yes, it is extremely suitable for renunciation. So that's why northern direction is spoken. One more question. Why Vidura was considered Shudra? His mother was Dasi, but his father was Srila Vyasadeva. Also by Guna Karma, Vidura was not Shudra. Yes. So why was Vidura considered Shudra? See, because this is the point. There are different considerations in this. When you talk about Vidura, within Mahabharata itself, Vidura is sometimes talked as a Shudra, sometimes talked as a great sage like a Brahmana, a Nitidnya, like Vidura Niti is famous, like just like there is Shukra Niti. So he's considered as a great transcendental, greatly learned Brahman. Sometimes he's considered, because he's also in the part of ruling, he's also considered as Kshatriya, So the point is, there are various perspectives with which it is spoken. So because he was born as a Shudra, because he was born from a Shudrani, and naturally he could not inherit the kingdom because he was considered born from a Shudrani's womb. So from that angle, he was considered a Shudra, like that. But if you consider his father side, it is Vyasadev, and that's how he was so learned in his understanding of Shastra. And from that angle, there are references where he is also considered like a Brahmana. He is considered like a great sage, Vidura, Mahatma Vidura, it is said. So those references are also there. So it just depends on which perspective you're talking about. So from the perspective of his inheriting kingdom, because he was son of a Shudrani, he was not accepted as a Kshatriya, and he was considered a Shudra, because that lady was Dasi of Ambalika, who gave birth to Vidura. So from that particular angle. But if you just change the perspective, you will see that Vidura is also spoken as Brahmana and also as Kshatriya at times, like that. What should be our understanding about why did Vidura, pure devotee of Lord, inspired Dhritarashtra to renounce? and achieve liberation, but why not prema bhakti? Okay, this also comes in the next two verses where Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that why was Vidura not inspiring, or rather, why did he not inspire Dhritarashtra to practice prema bhakti? So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's explanation is because Dhritarashtra had offended the great devotees of the Lord so much that that's why he was not qualified to receive prema bhakti in that particular life. This is the explanation of Vishwanath Chakravarti. He says that such was the great offense done by Dhritarashtra to Pandavas and the Queen Draupadi and all the others, great devotees of the Lord, that this was the effect of Vaishnava Aparad. Because of the great Vaishnava Aparad that he did, so he was not offered Prema Bhakti by Lord or Vidura. That's the reason. Bhakti Mishra Jnana and Jnana Mishra Bhakti. What is the difference? Please, can you elaborate it? Okay. So this topic is there again discussed in Srimad Bhagavad Gita's 7th chapter's 14th verse by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Chaturvida bhajante mam jana sukritino arjuna arto arthartir jidnyasu jnani cha bharitarsha. So for further details, you can look into that purport by Vishwanath Chakravarti. So he explains about three kinds of bhakti. There is Guni Bhuta Bhakti, there is Pradhani Bhuta Bhakti, and there is Kevala Bhakti. So actually Bhakti Mishra Jnana comes under Guni Bhuta Bhakti. See, one point is no path can succeed without bhakti. There has to be some bhakti, but that bhakti is not accepted as the ultimate goal by the path of jnana or yoga. So when bhakti is only accepted in the part of sadhana, but not as sadhya, and that too in the minimal portion, that is known as Guni Bhuta Bhakti, or known as Jnana or Bhakti Mishra Jnana. All these words like Jnana, Yoga, we say, right? Karma, Jnana, Yoga. They also have some element of Bhakti in them, but that element is only in terms of little bit of practice, not as a sadhya. So that is what is known as Guni Bhuta Bhakti, means that particular karma, jnana, yoga, that guna of that is most prominent and not bhakti. So bhakti mishra jnana actually means jnana. You can just call it as jnana also. Whenever we say jnana, it means bhakti mishra jnana. Why? Because jnana cannot give its perfection without bhakti. It's impossible. At least in terms of the practice, sadhan, the jnani has to accept some amount of bhakti. So that's why they do meditation, they read scriptures, they accept the Supreme Lord, but they don't accept him as the sadhya. So that's what determines difference between bhakti mishra jnana and jnana mishra bhakti. So Bhakti Mishra Jnana is basically Jnana. That's all. Bhakti Mishra Yoga is actually basically yoga, like that. That way you can say. So when the thing becomes reversed, that when Bhakti becomes prominent and there are only elements of Jnana in it, elements of yoga in it, then it will be other way around. Now it will become Jnana Mishra Bhakti or Yoga Mishra Bhakti. So that is a very recommended procedure. Jnana Mishra Bhakti is a form of bhakti which is Pradhani Bhuta Bhakti, second category. And Jnana Mishra Bhakta goes back to spiritual world in Shantaras. Jnana Mishra Bhakti actually avoids spiritual world. Bhakti Mishra Jnana doesn't avoid spiritual world. But Jnana Mishra Bhakti can avoid Vaikuntha and Shantaras in Vaikuntha. You understand? So that's the difference actually. Although the word Jnana Mishra comes, but we should not consider it that it is like impersonal Jnana. No, it's basically Jnana which is favorable to Bhakti, and that Jnana is more to do with working of Lord in the material world. So a Jnana Mishra Bhakta is actually Shantarati Bhakta. He achieves Shantarati, while Bhakti Mishra Jnana achieves only moksha, Sayujya Mukti, and not the spiritual world. That's the difference between two. So you can see further details also are there in Vishwanath's purport on that particular verse. With reference to Manduk Muni's story, what should be our understanding about from what age law of karma starts acting on children? Like law of land says after 18 years or so. Else they are treated as juvenile and are not punished like adults for crime. Yes, Manu does speak about certain considerations of children because they are ignorant, so they do get less punishment in terms of law of karma than the elders. And this probably could be the reason why Manduk Muni was also disturbed over his getting punished so severely. But the point is, I mean, at least in my reading, I have not come across very crystal clear understanding saying that at what particular age, the children's sins are also taken into account to punish them as severely as an adult. There are certain ideas that are floated around, but I see that like in some religious system they say after 7 years of age and all, but those ideas are only in terms of, I have not come across this idea at least in scriptures. So scriptures do speak about this idea of children receiving lesser punishment because they are ignoramus, while a full grown adult who understands everything very well, so such a person, he deserves the acute punishment that is there for the offense, that is there for that particular sin, like that. But in terms of what age and all that, such vivid details are not there, because I mean karma is very complex principle. Gahana karmano gati, it is said that it's very difficult to understand how karma works and all that. But in general, human life is considered life of responsibility, and surely even if a child commits, there is certain provision of a reaction, although not as severe as somebody who is who is a mature person who understands everything about the working of world, and he is doing that punishment. That's how even Manduk Muni felt that, okay, you could give a punishment for that sin that I committed in childhood, but why such a severe commitment when I committed it when I was ignorant? Means punishment should have been lesser. So there is certain punishment he also accepts that will be there, although he was a child. But why putting on shula like that, in something like that? So that way. Vidura lived exactly how many years? As Srila Prabhupada writes, 100 years, but he came before Krishna and departed after Krishna's disappearance. So at least must be on planet at least for 125 plus years. Yeah, that is true. Srila Jiva Goswami says that he didn't live exactly 100 years, but more than 100 years. So naturally, because Vidura has come before Krishna and he is departing after Krishna, so it has to be more than 125 years. So that is Jiva Goswami's opinion also. He says that in the commentary. But he doesn't give the exact figure. He says that he lived more than 100 years. Varsha Shatam, he says, Kinchit Adhikam, not just 100 years, but more than 100 years. That is his comment. Right. Was Yudhishthir Maharaj son of Yamaraj? Vidura was Yamaraj himself. Yeah, Yudhishthir Maharaj is incarnation of Yamaraj. So Yudhishthir is actually considered, I mean, even in Mahabharata, this principle comes where we see that Yudhishthir is considered as son of Dharmaraj or Yamaraj, and we see that Vidura is actually Yamaraj. So from that angle, he is like son of Vidura. I mean, that particular angle, like that, So the point is, Devi Kunti, when she begot Yudhishthir, so that was by Yamaraja's intervention, by the boon that she had received from Durvasa. And after disappearance of Vidura, Mahabharata does speak about actually Vidura entering into the body of Dharmaraj, that is Yudhishthir. So it speaks in that intriguing manner and saying that it was like actually Dharmaraj was entering into his son. This is one particular episode that is happening after Vidura leaves in Mahabharata. So I mean, we do understand clearly that Vidura is Yamaraj, and that way, and Dharmaraj, or rather Yudhishthir, is son of Dharmaraj. But because they are playing different roles, Yamaraj has already become into Vidura. So in that manner, like being Yudhishthira being his son or like that, that is not spoken by Mahabharata or commentaries in any way, because he's playing a completely different role. He is not in that role when it comes to Mahabharata. But it is said finally Mahabharata has its version where it is said that finally Vidura also merged into the body of uh, Yudhishthira, who is considered in one way, being son of Dharmaraj, not different than Dharmaraj, like that. From that angle, also it talks about, so that their relationship and their being integral to each other is spoken in that manner in Mahabharata in some way. But in commentaries, there is not any much more explanation on that front. If someone gets an animal form in next life, it is like he has to go through all the 84 lakh species. And what is the sequence? How actually one is then evolved to human form? I didn't understand the context and relevance of this question, so probably you can write the connection, and then I would take this, because I'm not getting the connection to the current context. I can answer that to you specifically. When did Vidura visit Dhritarashtra? After Krishna left this world, Vidura met Uddhav after this. Okay, I guess I had answered this question yesterday, but probably it was missed. Vidura visited Dhritarashtra surely after Krishna left the world, right? And that's how we know that Vidura didn't describe the event of Lord Krishna's departure to any of them like that. So Vidura left before the Kurukshetra war began, and then went on the pilgrimage, then met Uddhava, then met Maitreya. Then he, from Maitreya, he heard about the whole thing about, the, I mean, even from Uddhava for that matter, but he heard about the annihilation and all that. And then he came back. So this was many years afterwards. So when he came back, already Krishna has disappeared and all that has happened. So then he met Dhritarashtra and inspired him to renounce the kingdom. So that's the order in which Bhagavatam speaks these events, which are slightly different than Mahabharata, because in Mahabharata, the renunciation is before Maushal Leela, that is before Lord Krishna and Yadu's, I mean, the pastime of their annihilation happens like that. But Bhagavatam's version is clearly like this. And from that angle, we see that Bhagavatam does speak that Vidura came only after disappearance of Lord Krishna and inspired Dhritarashtra to renounce his kingdom and go. So at one place, one of the commentators of Bhagavatam, Vamshidhar, does say that Bhagavatam's events are different than Mahabharata, and he says that this has to be explained by Kalpantara Vyavastha. He says that it should be explained in the manner that this is explanation from a different kalpa, So Bhagavatam is speaking the events of a different kalpa, or rather Mahabharata is speaking events of a different kalpa, like that. Sometimes they speak some things which match, and sometimes they speak some things which are from different kalpa. So this also has to be understood for those who are reading Mahabharata, that just like Mahabharat's Parikshit, that when he was cursed, he builds a glass castle and he puts himself in the glass castle. And he's saying, oh, now what can Takshak do? He can't climb on a palace which is just on one pillar of glass, and the whole palace is also of glass. So you have heard this story. This is actually from Mahabharata, but this is not how Parikshit responds in Bhagavatam, right? So then this has to be explained from Kalpantar Vyavastha. That Parikshit is, which Mahabharata speaks, is from some other Kalpa, not the one which Bhagavatam speaks about. So like that, similarly, there are many points about other pastimes aspects also. And we should know that where Bhagavatam matches, and if at all you are reading Mahabharata, where does it not? It not. And then that time we go ahead with Acharya's explanations with Bhagavatam's version, like that. Okay, one more question. Aryama took over while Yamaraj was in the role of Vidura. Is this also the case when demigods come down to take part in pastimes of the Lord? Depends. Actually, when demigods come out in pastimes of the Lord, especially like pastimes of Lord Krishna, many yadus were from demigods. And that was typically the amshas of demigods were there. There were demigod amshas that came to participate, while the original, so to say, demigod continued to rule in the demigod planets. So it was not exactly like here in this case Vidura. Vidura himself appeared. Yamraj himself appeared like Vidura, but with demigods, many of the yadus were amshas of demigods. Right? So same way, even with Pandavas, like they were considered amshas of the particular demigods. So in that particular manner. So that kind of provision happens by Lord's arrangement of the Leela Shakti, and that provision can be there for even demigods and all. So you will have to take it pastime by pastime if it's the same case or if it's different in that. Okay, Prabhu. So I am going to move ahead and take few verses which are just descriptions actually about what happened next. So we can the remaining portion, like around 5-10 verses, I will finish right now, and then remaining portion we can finish tomorrow. But this is only description, so not much discussion. Evam Raja Vidurena Nujena Pradnya Chakshurbodhit Ajamidha Chitva Sveshu Sneha Pashandradhimno Nishchakram Bhratra Sandarshitadva. Thus Maharaj Dhritarashtra, the scion of the family of Ajamidha, firmly convinced by introspective knowledge, Pradnya, broke at once the strong network of familial affection by his resolute determination. Thus he immediately left home to set out on the path of liberation, as directed by his younger brother. So after hearing these strong words by Vidura, the effect was acute and immediate. In this manner, although the blind Dhritarashtra, he now had received Pradnya Chakshu. He had actually now received the eyes of knowledge, great transcendental knowledge of renunciation, and he was inspired now to leave the home. Finally, the effect had taken place. So this great descendant of Ajamedha, that is Dhritarashtra, Chitva Sveshu Sneha Pashan, he cut down all the ties of affection to the family, and Dradhimno, being firmly resolute in his determination to live, he set out on the path that was shown by his brother, that is Vidura. So this is the effect of great effect of sadhus. Prabhupada says in purport that association of sadhus. Lavamatra sadhu sangha sarva siddhi hoy. Prabhupada refers to that like that. So Prabhupada says even we are not ashamed to admit that this fact was experienced in our practical life. That is the power of association of sadhu. Were we not favored by his divine grace, Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, by our first meeting for a few minutes only, it would have been impossible for us to accept this mighty task of describing Srimad Bhagavatam in English. Without seeing him at that opportune moment, We could have become a very great business magnate. Prabhupada is saying, I could have become a great business magnate, but it was the great mercy of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati but never would have been able to walk the path of liberation and be engaged in the factual service of the Lord under instruction of His divine grace. So Prabhupada is also remembering the great mercy of Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada on him. Out of his humility, he is saying, I would have been also just be a great business magnate, but by His great mercy, I was delivered and I'm able to render some service of presenting Bhagavatam in English. So that is actually great effect of pure devotee association. Although, of course, we know Prabhupada is a Nitya Siddha, but out of his natural humility as a disciple, he is glorifying his spiritual master's association and the power of that association, like that, in this manner. So this is why this association is very important. Prabhupada says there should be the sadhus, whom we hear regularly and associate regularly, so that we don't get tangled up completely in just the ties of material affection. This is what Prabhupada says. What did Gandhari do? That is also spoken. Patim prayatam subalasya putri pati brata chanu jagama sadhvi Himalayam nyasta danda praharsham manasvinameva satsam praharah. The gentle and chaste Gandhari, who was the daughter of King Subala of Kandahar or Gandhar, followed her husband, seeing that he was going to the Himalaya mountains, which are the delight of those who have accepted the staff of renounced order, like fighters who have accepted a good lashing from the enemy. So what did the Gandhari do? Dhritarashtra's wife. So she saw that her husband was leaving, without telling anybody anything, but she saw that her husband was leaving to Himalaya. So she also followed him because she was the greatly chaste, devoted lady. Gandhari is well known for her chastity, actually. So Pativrata, she just accepted her husband's service as her only vrata, and she followed her husband because she was a great sadhvi, and she followed him to Himalayam Nyasta Danda Praharsham. That Himalayan region is called as Nyasta Danda Praharsham. जिन्होंने दंड धारण किया है ऐसे लोगों के लिए विशेष हर्ष देने वाला हिमालय. So actually Himalayas is a delight for those who are holding the staff of renunciation. That's what Prabhupada translates. So although Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Devi Gandhari she was a princess, she came from a royal family, and naturally she was a Sukumari, she was a very delicate lady, but then still she followed her husband to a difficult place like Himalayas. Why was this? Because actually she was also delighted to be her husband following the path of renunciation. Her only joy was with her husband, and whose joy was now on the path of renunciation. So as Vanaprasthas, both of them left the house and went to the direction of Himalayas, like that. And a drishtant is given to explain how Himalayas is a delight for those who accept the renounced order of life. Just as it is said, for those who are Kshatriyas, those who are Manasvinam, Viranam, Shuranam, those who are brave and courageous warriors, for them, if they get the thrashing by enemy, they are more delighted. The lashing or thrashing by enemy inspires them to even fight the more. They enjoy the war, because they are Kshatriyas. So similarly, these people, Devi Gandhari as well as Dhritarashtra, both of them now were on the path of renunciation, and they were happy to accept that hardship because they were inspired by Vidura's words in this particular manner, like that. So she didn't give even a second thought, actually, that whether she should stay back or no, how can she manage Himalayas, and no, because she was so chaste Without any second thought, she just followed her husband. Prabhupada speaks about Mother Sita also, how Mother Sita also, when Lord Ramachandra was going to forest, and she was not banished, but still she accepted voluntarily to be with her husband, because she is the emblem of supreme chastity and purity. Mother Sita is actually embodiment of all purity and chastity. So naturally, she followed her husband, Lord Ramachandra, and his joy was actually the joy of her heart, and not staying at the palace or like that. So perfect examples actually of what is chastity. Prabhupada glorifies these wonderful examples of Sita and Sita Devi and Gandhari, in this particular manner, like that. So because this was Vanaprastha ashram, so naturally Gandhari Devi also could accompany Dhritarashtra along with him, like that. Sannyasa ashram is where typically the lady doesn't follow her husband, and sannyasi is all by himself in this particular manner. Prabhupada also talks about Ekdandi sannyasis and Tridandi sannyasis, saying Nyasta Danda, taking that particular thing. He says that Vaishnavas are actually Tridandi sannyasis, while Mayavadis are Ekadandi sannyasis. And that's how Mayavadi sannyasis, he says, they like the Himalayas. I mean, Prabhupada is making a general statement. In general, they like the Himalayas, they want to go there. But Vaishnavas like Vaishnav Tirthas, like Vrindavan and Puri, So this way. So that's why he says Vaishnavas are Narottamas and Mayavadis are Dhiras. You remember the first two categories that we discussed, Atur Sannyasi and also the Narottamas, this way, Bhakti Vivekis. So Vaishnavas are Narottamas and Mayavadi Sannyasis are Dhiras. What was the effect on Yudhishthir after they left? Ajata Shatru Kritamaitro Hutagni Vipran Natvati Lago Bhumi Rukmai Graham Pravishto Guru Vandanaya Nacha Pashat Pittarao Saubalincha. Maharaj Yudhishthir, whose enemy was never born, performed his daily morning duties by praying, offering fire sacrifice to the sun god, and offering obeisances, grains, cows, land, and gold to the Brahmanas. He then entered the palace to pay respects to the elderly. However, he could not find his uncles or aunt, the daughter of King Subala. So they had left in the night when everybody was sleeping. Gandhari and Dhritarashtra left along with Vidura. So when afterwards, when Yudhishthir on the next day, Kritamaitraha means he had finished his Sandhya Vandanam, he had worshipped the Lord Mitra, that is sun god, and he also had finished his morning duties of offering his obeisances to Agni and all that, all the Brahmanas, offering them the charity. So then he went to offer his obeisances to Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, because that was his daily routine. After doing his Sandhya Vandanam, offering the obeisances to demigods and also to Brahmanas, giving them charity, then he would come and offer his obeisances to his elders and Dhritarashtra and Gandhari. These were his uncle and aunt. So he used to come and offer obeisances. But when he went for that, he found that they are not there. He found that neither there was Dhritarashtra, Saubali, means Gandhari was not there. Similarly, there was no Vidura. So he was little, shocked and anxiety stricken that they were not there in this particular manner. So he was very much surprised that where they had gone, and felt greatly distressed in this particular manner. So Prabhupada in purport talks about how householders are supposed to actually follow the scriptural injunctions. I mean, why householders? Everybody for that matter. But even being a householder, one is supposed to follow the scriptural injunctions, like getting up early in the morning and taking bath and doing all this morning duties of whatever, like in our Vaishnav lifestyle, we also have our morning Mangalarti and all that in this particular manner. Prabhupada but says that this is in the middle of the para. Modern householders are practiced to different modes of life, however, namely to rise late and then take bed tea without any sort of cleanliness and without any purificatory practices as mentioned above. The household children are taken to practice what the parents practice, and therefore the whole generation glides to hell. So you see, all these Western, sometimes ideas coming from other cultures like Betty and whatnot, that these are picked up by parents, and then children also pick up those same ideas and they start following those same ideas. So instead of getting up early in the morning and doing nice Mangalarti, chanting, and other activities of devotional life, people lead such lives which is a poor, very thoughtless imitation of many times other cultures, and that's how even the generation gets degraded in that particular manner. So Prabhupada is condemning that and saying nothing good can be expected from them unless they associate with sadhus. So that's why unless people associate with sadhus, then they can't get rid of such influences of society like that. Okay, I'll just take one verse and stop. Tatra Sanjayamasinam prapachoruddvignamanasah gavalgane kvanastato vruddho hinascha netrayoh. Maharaj Yudhishthir, full of anxiety, turned to Sanjaya, who was sitting there, and said, "O Sanjaya, where is our uncle who is old and blind?" So Sanjaya was there, who was minister, and to him, Yudhishthir, who was very much stricken with anxiety, where his uncle and aunt had gone. Actually, you see, Yudhishthir was so amazing. Yudhishthir had so much love for everybody, and what to speak of his uncle and aunt. Although these are the same people who, especially his uncle, Dhritarashtra. Gandhari was virtuous, but then Dhritarashtra, we see that he's the same person who tried to kill them and who did so much of evil thing to them, but still he loved them so much. He loved them dearly, and that's how when they were gone, he really felt a great distress that they had gone and they were old and invalid. How will they be protected? In this particular manner. Ambacha hataputrarta pitruvyah kvagatah surit api maya krit pradne hatabandhu sabhadyaya ashan samana shamalam gangayam dukkhito patat. Where is my well-wisher, Uncle Vidura and Mother Gandhari, who is very afflicted due to all her sons' demise? My uncle Dhritarashtra was also very mortified due to the death of all his sons and grandsons. Undoubtedly, I am very ungrateful. Did he therefore take my offenses very seriously and along with his wife drown himself in the Ganges? So Dhritarashtra was wondering, where did my Amba, my mother Gandhari, and where did my uncle, that is Dhritarashtra, go away? Is actually always he felt that he had done such a great wrong to them by killing all their sons. So was it that because of that distress, finally they had gone and drowned themselves in the Ganges? He was conjecturing in that manner, thinking that probably they were so distressed that they went and drowned themselves in Ganges, like that, because I have done so much evil to them. Although they had protected me in my childhood, all of us Pandavas and our mother, they had protected us after our father's death. But then still, I am so ungrateful that in that reciprocation of that protection, I killed all of his sons. So this is how Yudhishthira is thinking. He is amazing person. Although it was completely plan of the Lord, and he also it's also fact that Dhritarashtra was indeed very evil-minded towards him, but still he feels that much love for them. So this is his great virtue. Dhritarashtra was always actually Ajat Shatru, and that's why Lord Krishna loved him so much. Like that we say. This is, Prabhupada says, this is the nature between a devotee of the Lord and non-devotee. Fine, Prabhu. So I would stop here because it's already time. So we would finish all the verses, remaining verses tomorrow. And we would end this discussion tomorrow. At this point, I would stop. And if there are any questions on this remaining portion that we discussed, you may ask. And for others, those who have services may kindly proceed for the services. Okay, are there any questions? I would see in the chat window. Okay, I don't see any questions further. Fine, Prabhu. So, as I don't see any questions, so tomorrow we will meet for the last section on this and we'll end. Right now, I will stop here. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande.